This is one of the darkest days in modern history, and most people don't even realize it. A single person whose existence would shape the fate of millions, a school day that turned into a nightmare, an explosion that poisoned an entire ocean, and a city completely erased in under 2 minutes. All of this happened around one date, April 20th, a day that carries some of the most disturbing, heavy, and unforgettable moments in history. And by the end of this video, one of these stories will stay with you. Stay with me, because history is not just something we remember, it is something we learn from, or repeat. Let's begin with a moment that changed the course of human history forever. The year is 1889. In a small Austrian town called Braunau on Inn, a child was born. His name was Adolf Hitler. Now, instead of just saying who he became, let's understand how it happened. As a young man, Hitler was not seen as a future dictator. He was quiet, introverted, passionate about art. He dreamed of becoming a painter. He applied to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. He was rejected twice. That rejection changed something in him. He spent years struggling, sometimes homeless, absorbing the ideas around him in Vienna, ideas filled with nationalism, resentment, and hatred. Then came World War I. He joined the German army. For the first time, he found purpose, structure, belonging. But when the war ended, Germany was defeated, humiliated, broken. And in that moment of weakness, he found his voice. He rose through a small political group that would later become the Nazi Party. By 1933, he was in power. By 1939, he had started World War II. And by 1945, tens of millions were dead. 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, entire cities destroyed. All of it tied back to one life that began on April 20th. And here is the truth that makes this even more disturbing. He was not something supernatural. He was human, which means the conditions that created him can exist again. Now let me ask you something. What happens when violence walks into a place that is supposed to feel safe? The year is 1999. At Columbine High School, students were going about a normal day, talking, laughing, planning what came next. At 11:19 a.m., everything changed. 2 students entered the school armed with weapons. In less than an hour, 13 people were killed and many more were injured. But what most people don't realize is that it could have been far worse. Explosives had been planted in the cafeteria. If they had worked, hundreds could have died. The response that day was delayed. Lives that could have been saved were lost. And the story that spread afterward was not entirely true. This was not just a simple act of revenge. It was something deeper, more complex, and more disturbing. But the impact was undeniable. Schools changed forever. Security increased. Fear entered places that once felt safe. And a generation was left asking, how did this happen? Now we move from human violence to human error. The year is 2010. In the Gulf of Mexico, a massive oil rig stood over one of the deepest wells ever drilled. It was called the Deepwater Horizon. On April 20th, an explosion tore through it. Fire consumed the platform. 11 workers lost their lives. The rig burned and then sank. But the real disaster had just begun, because beneath the ocean, the well was still open. Oil poured into the sea, day after day, for 87 days. By the time it was stopped, millions of barrels had spilled into the ocean, coastlines covered in oil, wildlife devastated, entire ecosystems damaged. And here is what makes it worse. There were warning signs. Concerns had been raised. Decisions were made to save time and money. This was not just an accident, it was preventable. Now for the final story, and this one most people have never heard. The year was 1902. On the island of Martinique, there stood a beautiful city called Saint-Pierre. Nearly 30,000 people lived there. Busy streets, a thriving culture, a city full of life. Overlooking it was Mount Pelée. In April, the volcano began to show signs of danger. Smoke rising, ash falling, strange smells in the air, animals fleeing. People were afraid. They wanted to leave, but they were told it was safe. Warnings were dismissed, and then came the morning of May 8th, a massive eruption. Not lava, but a superheated cloud of gas and ash racing down the mountain faster than anyone could escape, hot enough to destroy everything. In less than 2 minutes, the city was gone. Nearly 30,000 people killed, buildings erased, lives ended instantly. Almost no one survived. One of the deadliest volcanic disasters in modern history. And it all began with warnings that were ignored. Now, take a step back and look at this day as a whole. A birth that led to global destruction, a school that became a tragedy, an explosion that poisoned an ocean, and a city that trusted the wrong voices. Different stories, different places, one date. So what does April 20th teach us? That history is not just about what happened, it is about what could have been prevented. It is about warning signs, decisions, consequences. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these stories stayed with you the most? Because every single day has a story, and this one changed the world in ways we are still living with today. If you want to know what happened every single day in history, subscribe.